Okay, hi, my name is Candida Steel, and I'm retired from being a judge on the U.S. Civilian Board of Contract Appeals. I handle federal government contract disputes around the country, including one in northern South Dakota, I think. And I've been with the program for about 20 years.
Hi, I'm Marcia Holland. I was a career public defender in Alaska, but having moved to Montana, I now teach at the law school here. I too have been involved with this program for a long time.
Morning or afternoon, depending on your time zone. I can't do the math. My name is Ben Glickman. I'm a supervising deputy attorney general with the state of California. Much more importantly, I'm an alumnus of this fine program and was lucky enough to be on a national championship team back in 1995. So quite a while ago. And you can see we're at the House Intelligence Committee. So just like the real thing. So we're very glad you guys took it upon yourselves to continue working and join us by Zoom today.
I agree. So we're doing question, I think it's number 3 in unit 3.
They need to introduce themselves.
Yeah. Oh, yes, please introduce yourselves. Thank you, Ben.
I'm Sarah Anglin.
I'm Ella Murray.
I'm Ryan Peldo.
And I'm Sam Tobin.
Welcome, I'm sorry. So if you're ready to hear the question, I'm sure you've studied it carefully, but for the record, in 2020, we celebrate the ratification of the 19th Amendment, which recognized the right of women to vote. Despite recent controversy, the Equal Rights Amendment has not yet been declared ratified. What are the similarities and differences between the two amendments? What impact, if any, has the 19th Amendment had on women in achieving equality with men in the United States and around the world? What are the advantages and disadvantages of states passing their own equal rights amendments rather than ratifying a national constitutional amendment? You may begin.
While the 19th Amendment and the ERA both advance the rights of women, they are very different amendments. The 19th Amendment grants to women the right to vote and reads, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied nor abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." It does not guarantee any other rights besides voting. The ERA, on the other hand, would give women equal rights in all matters. It reads, "Equality of right under the law shall not be denied nor abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex." While they sound very similar, the ERA would protect all rights, from legal distinction in the case of divorce and property, would guarantee equal pay, equality in the military, protect women's health, and protect all of their rights in the Constitution.
In 1919, women won the right to vote when the United States passed the 19th Amendment. This was the first big step that the United States government took to acknowledge the work that the women have done for this country. Although certain states allowed women the right to vote prior to the 19th Amendment, many women, especially women of color, were still disenfranchised long after it was passed. However, federal recognition of women's right to vote was a huge step in the right direction. Additionally, the ratification of the 19th Amendment then led to the development of the ERA, which would not only grant women equality, but would also ensure that men were not discriminated against either. Although some equality issues have virtually been resolved since 1923, like divorce and property, the ERA would guarantee equality regarding employment, military, medical treatment, custody, and more. This still applies today, as Virginia just became the 38th state to ratify it in January of 2020, and 5 states, including South Dakota, have revoked the ratification.
Although the United States was one of the first nations to recognize a woman's right to vote, their impact on other nations was minute. New Zealand was the first nation to allow women the right to vote in 1893, and the US, among other nations, shortly followed. But because this movement had already begun, the United States joining wasn't as influential as one might hope. The reason for this can be pointed to the fact that the United States has strong hard power, but lacks soft power. With our nation's strong foreign influence and superior military, our nation thrives with this sort of control. However, when it comes to influence on other nations because of a country's attractiveness and appeal, the United States is not a huge contender. This goes beyond the women's suffrage movement, as the U.S. was one of the last nations to abolish slavery and still has not passed an equal rights amendment federally. Due to this, the United States passing the 19th Amendment didn't have a strong impact on other nations because the United States was in no way a leader of the cause. Instead, many nations, including the U.S., looked towards the British Empire. Furthermore, after women were guaranteed the legal right to vote, society had to accept this in order for change to be seen. This occurred in the U.S. and can be seen today in other nations, such as Egypt, Oman, Kenya, and other Middle Eastern countries where women are still barred from voting despite their legal right.
In the struggle to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, it has been proposed that amendments be passed by the states rather than federally. One advantage of allowing states to pass their own equal rights amendments is speed. The current federal amendment ratification has been drawn out for years, but allowing states to pass their own amendment could speed things up within states who are wholeheartedly in favor of equal rights. This does, however, come with its own disadvantages. States who do not currently support the federal amendment might be even slower to pass their own state amendments, which could lead to drastic differences between the rights in each state. States have historically not been very supportive of individual rights. States should be allowed to do much of their own regulation, but as economies may differ by states, but human rights do not. One possible compromise would be to allow the federal government to pass an equal rights amendment, giving a minimum standard for human rights, which all states must abide by. Give the states the ability to pass their own, stronger amendments, similar to the state and federal minimum wage system. Other countries have already passed similar laws. By following in their footsteps, the U.S. could increase their soft power and revitalize their global image.
In conclusion, the 19th Amendment was a monumental beginning to a long struggle for equal rights. The Equal Rights Amendment is the next measure that the United States should take in order to guarantee gender equality for everyone. However, as Eisenhower said, you can't change people's hearts merely with laws.
Thank you. And if you'll put your notes away, I know you will, I'll ask the question, and I'd like to follow up on what you were just touching upon. There are, I think, at least half the states that have adopted some form of an equal rights amendment. And Justice Ginsburg thinks that it's time to maybe scrap the currently on the table but confusing equal rights amendment. Do you think that we should start over again? And if so, do you have an example of something that's well written that could be proposed at the federal level that might be able to gain passage?
I think because the deadline for ratifying the Equal Rights Amendments has long since passed, starting over would probably be the best course of action at this time, just so that there's less argument about the legitimacy of any Equal Rights Amendment that does get passed.
I agree, and starting anew with a new amendment would kind of reset that slate. We wouldn't have the confusion of when is the deadline, or if states will rescind their votes, and that would be a much easier start to get this movement passed.
Mm-hmm.
But
Although,
sorry, let me just move on to the next thought in this. Doesn't Article 5 doesn't have a time frame in there. That's the deadline set by Congress was merely in the preamble. It didn't have of the amendment. It didn't have anything to do with the amendment that was proposed under Article 5. So don't you think that maybe they should just accept the ratification?
I think they should accept some form of an equal rights amendment. I think starting over and rewriting a new one would give us the ability to include all aspects and kind of form it to today's society rather than in 1923 when it was originally written. But we do need some form of a federal equal rights amendment passed today.
And also, the timeline is not the only issue that we have currently. We also have the 5 states trying to rescind their ratification. So that also brings up an issue as well.
Why did South Dakota rescind it?
They mainly didn't agree with the federal government being able to extend the deadline, whether the deadline was legal or ethical to do anyways. They merely decided that they didn't agree with it, so they rescinded it, their ratification.
Thank you. Sorry, Ben, I didn't mean to jump in.
Oh, no, not at all. So I guess my question is, why do we need an equal rights amendment at all? Why isn't the equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment, isn't that enough?
I believe that.
Go ahead, Sam.
I believe that just because society has adopted new ways since 1923, that there is not really any harm in solidifying it and taking out room for interpretation.
Society has definitely changed since this amendment was written, and there's a lot of societal changes that have occurred, but also doing this on a federal level would prevent states from writing laws and then revoking them later on and taking away those rights and those protections.
Mm-hmm. We can even look at the voting rights that have been. When the 19th Amendment was first going into place, some states passed voting rights further than, or before other states, such as Wyoming being the first state to do this. If we pass a federal equal rights amendment, it will kind of make sure that states are all on the same page, making sure that equality between men and women isn't something that should be debatable, it's something that is concrete.
So just talking about historically, when the Equal Rights Amendment was the proposed amendment was being discussed primarily in the 70s, it was a group of women primarily that marshaled forces against its passage. Looking at the issues they were focusing on through the lens of 2020, can you identify some of the concerns they have and whether or not they're concerns now?
There's people like Phyllis Schlafly who's concerned about the draft and how women would be then have to apply for the draft. And she was worried that women would be able to have to go to war and not be able to take care of their families and things like that.
Again, there was a lot of, sorry, Ella.
No,
there was
go
a
ahead.
lot of talk of separate spheres at that time, and I think overall separate spheres are less prevalent in society today. And also with the draft, I've seen a huge outpouring of support among women for requiring women to support the draft. With equal rights come equal responsibilities.
Thank you.
So, do you think Joe Biden's promise to choose a woman as his vice presidential running mate violates the spirit of the Equal Rights Amendment, or is it consistent with the spirit of the Equal Rights Amendment?
I think that Joe Biden choosing to pick his vice president merely off of the fact of gender is maybe not the right way of doing it, whether it was to pick someone because he's a male or because he's a female is just wrong ethically. But if that woman is fit to do the job, then I think it would be okay to do so.
I think that him choosing a vice president should be on qualification and if they're able to do a job. However, I think having a woman as a vice president would give women a lot more opportunity and representation in our government, considering women do not have a strong influence within Congress as they are such low numbers and have consistently and historically had low numbers in Congress. I think a woman as a vice president would guarantee women some more say within our government, but I think that it cannot solely be based on gender.
Yeah, I agree, because while women make up half of the population, they only represent 20% in Congress. So kind of give them more say.
Thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your
Congratulations.
time.
I hope you had fun. Our
Yes.
pleasure.
So Ben, you're first, I think.
Oh, sure. Let's see. Yeah, so I thought you guys did a very nice job on the prepared remarks. Not surprisingly, you answered the question. I thought the notion about hard versus soft power and the United States limited influence in some respects, that was certainly the first time we've heard that, and I think that's an interesting take on why the 19th may not have had the effect you might have otherwise expected. So I thought that was curious. On the Q&A, I thought it was a good conversation. The one constructive piece of criticism I would give is just to always make sure you're listening and answering directly to the question. And sometimes I think we were like a little bit to the left of the question or a little bit to the right of the question and not directly on it. But that said, the answers you provided and the examples you gave and the supporting evidence you provided was all very interesting and very strong. So I really did enjoy the conversation. We just wish we had more time.
I think we always want to have more time. Yeah. And so I echo what Ben said. You had a really good discussion of the differences between the ERA and the 19th Amendment. You really kind of did a deep dive into that. I appreciate the comment that was made about the 19th Amendment was a good first step in the right direction, because as we know, it still took the Voting Rights Act to really give the 19th Amendment some teeth. I really like the idea of the pros and cons about states adopting it in terms of focusing on the speed. That's a really important point, and I appreciate that you thought about that just in terms of it's easier to get things through individual states. But you had a good counterpart to that it really would be nice if all the states had the same rights. And finally, you had a really sophisticated legal and thoughtful argument about all the problems that would arise if we, in answer to one of the questions about just let's go ahead and ratify it. There's going to be lawsuits about whether the dates are right. There's lawsuits about the language, the lawsuits about whether or not, something that was worded using the word sex should be the word that we're using now in 2020. So really good job in that respect, answering that question. And I really liked you mentioned separate spheres and the draft. Really good answers. Thank you.
I agree. The only thing that hasn't already been mentioned that I thought was wonderful was you're referring to equal rights for men as well. That it's a balance in the ERA. I hope you've had a really wonderful time preparing for this. Actually, I hope it's been an intellectual challenge, and you've had fun working with each other, and I hope it will be something that you'll treasure the rest of your life, because I certainly know that being involved with this program is a highlight of mine. So what I really want to do is say, I know you're going to be absolutely wonderful citizens. I have no doubt of that. You'll vote in every election, and you'll pay attention to the news, and you'll tell your family what you want to do. But I hope you'll think of going further than that, than being a citizen. I mean, you might all end up wanting to be nurses and doctors, but we really need people who know what they're talking about when they talk about the Constitution, and know what they'd be doing if they became part of the government. If you were a representative or a senator or a lawyer or a judge, we need somebody who knows what the Constitution is about. And you've done better than my law school constitutional law class. So I'm sure you'll be doing just fine in the future. And I hope that this, if you're interested, I hope it inspires you to go further in political science or politics or government in some fashion, because you've done a lovely job. Thank you. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you all. We really appreciate it.